Coming up on The World Today. The World Health Organization says the pandemic disrupted health systems around the world. The U.S. and Israel take a historical flight to the UAE as Israel and the UAE work towards renewing ties. Plus, Russia says there is no need to bring military support to Belarus. A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Akaite Afia. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic has disrupted health system in almost every country in the world. The global agency's findings are based off of data collected from a survey conducted between March and June this year. It says more than half of countries' contraception and family planning was affected, as well as treatment of mental health disorders and cancer treatment. In the meantime, global coronavirus caseload remains on the rise.
According to the Center for Systems Science and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins University, the number of COVID-19 cases in the United States is only inches away from 6 million. The country has reported over 5.9 million confirmed cases nationwide as of Sunday, while the total fatalities reached 183,057 as of late Sunday. The worst hit areas are California, Florida, and Texas. Meanwhile, the cumulative number of COVID-19 infections in Latin America is close to 7.25 million as of Sunday, with over 3.86 million cases reported from Brazil, the second most affected country by the pandemic, only behind the United States. By Sunday, Brazil had reported over 3.8 million confirmed cases. The national death toll of COVID-19 reached 120,828. The Argentine Health Ministry says a total of 408,426 COVID-19 cases have so far been reported nationwide, with 8,457 deaths. And in Asia, India's COVID-19 tally rose above 3.6 million, and the death toll rose to 64,469 as of today. As many as 78,512 new cases and 971 deaths were recorded over the past 24 hours, the fifth consecutive day when the COVID-19 cases have increased by more than 75,000. There are still 781,975 active cases across the country, and more than 2.7 million people have been discharged from hospital. Across Europe, schools are preparing to reopen, and plans to reopen schools are under pressure as cases continue to rise in Spain, where classes in most regions are set to begin first week in September. Although schools in some regions like Murcia, Asturias, and the Canary Islands have delayed their start dates to the second week of September, students in the Basque, like in the Madrid region, will return the first week of September.
Just as the vast majority of Victorians are doing the right thing, and that's central to this strategy working.
Finally, the state of the epicenter of Australia's second wave of COVID-19 infections says the number of new cases fell to a near 2-month low, allowing authorities to detail in a week's time how stringent lockdown measures will be lifted. Victoria said it had detected 73 new cases in the past 24 hours, the lowest since July 3rd.
The nature of this virus means that it is...
India's former president, Pranab Mukherjee, who tested positive for the coronavirus this month, has died after weeks of being in the hospital. According to New Delhi's Army Hospital, Mukherjee had gone into septic shock after coming down with a lung infection. His medical condition had declined since Sunday. The veteran politician, who served as foreign and finance minister in previous administrations led by the now opposition Congress Party, had friends on both sides of the political divide. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he had left an indelible mark on the development trajectory of the nation. It's been a historic day in Sudan as the power-sharing government signed a peace agreement with the country's 5 key rebel groups. Signing the deal were the Justice and Equality Movement and Mini-Manawi Sudan Liberation Army, both of the western region of Darfur, and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, led by Malik Agar, present in South Kordofan and Blue Nile. The civilians and military leaders sharing power following the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir in April of last year say ending decades-long conflicts is a top priority of a 39-month transition. Signed in Juba, the South Sudanese capital, the deal offers rebel groups political representation and devolved powers, integration into the security forces, economic and land rights, and the chance of return for displaced people. More than 300,000 people are estimated to have been killed and 2.5 million displaced after the conflict in Darfur spread after 2003 as government forces and mainly Arab militia moved to repress mostly non-Arab rebels. Meanwhile, Rusesabagina, the man whose role in saving the people from the 1994 genocide was celebrated in the film Hotel Rwanda, is being held on terror charges. The 66-year-old, who was awarded the U.S. Medal of Freedom back in 2005, among other human rights awards. He was arrested abroad where he had been living in exile. The Rwanda Investigation Bureau says he was arrested on an international warrant for forming and leading terrorist movements operating in the region. Current charges, but has long been a critic of the Rwandan government. In 2011, he was accused of funding subversion in Rwanda, but no charges were brought. It's been another day of history making for Israel and the United Arab Emirates as Israel made its first flight to the Arab country today. The flight was allowed to cross Saudi Arabia airspace, which was usually blocked to Israeli air traffic. The UAE has become the 3rd Arab country in the Middle East to recognize Israel since its founding.
I believe that this agreement has the ability to change the whole course of the Middle East. For the last 3.5 years that I've been working on different issues in the Middle East, there's been a lot of sense of hopelessness. The last decades we've had conflict and war and division, and what happened here was 3 great leaders came together and they started writing the script for a new Middle East. The message that we carry for the Palestinians is also one of hope. We've done a lot of great work to lay out a pathway for them to improve their future. We've put an offer to their leadership on the table that will enable them to have a state and self-determination and an economic plan that could revitalize their economy. But we can't want more peace. We can't want peace more than they want peace. And so when they are ready, the whole region is very excited to help lift them up and move them forward. But they can't be stuck in the past.
The VOA's Linda Gradstein joins us now from Jerusalem. Linda, great to see you.
Yes, you too.
So, apart from the Israeli Prime Minister, who's obviously excited about this historical flight and the deal that renews diplomatic ties, how is the rest of Israel welcoming news about the fact that commercial operations have started in the UAE?
Israelis are very excited about this. I mean, you know, Israel is in the Middle East, but not really of the Middle East. And the idea that you can get on a plane, I mean, not yet, but soon, and go to Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and then go from there almost anywhere else is very exciting to Israelis. A lot of people I know are saying, you know, as soon as those flights open up, I'm going to be on those flights. Israelis love to travel, and something like 2 million Israelis go abroad out of a total of 9 million every year. So there's a lot of excitement. There's also a sense that it's an acceptance of Israel as part of the Middle East, and that it's only a matter of time until other Gulf states, including Bahrain, Oman, Saudi Arabia, join. And the sense is that unlike the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, this peace treaty is going to be a very warm peace, and you're going to have, hundreds of thousands of Israelis flying to Dubai and Abu Dhabi every year. It's only a 3-hour and 20-minute flight, and a lot of Emiratis coming to visit in Israel as well. It's important to remember that, in Jerusalem is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is one of the holy places of Islam. So it also has relevance for Emiratis who want to come visit Israel.
Well, as you mentioned, it's very exciting for Israelis, but for the Palestinians, this kind of kills their dream of having a separate state. And they have no plans of reaching out to the United States. But, is that even an option that they could consider? And what would that mean for the region?
I don't see them reaching out to the United States, certainly as long as the current administration is in power. It's President Trump who moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which Palestinians obviously fought very much against. I think we need to remember that part of this deal with Abu Dhabi is that Israel backed away from its plan to annex up to a third of the West Bank. That was set to happen very soon. It was part of the Trump peace plan. And so, the Emiratis are saying, look, it's not that we abandoned the Palestinians, we got Israel to back down. At the same time, the idea was that you couldn't, that nobody else would sign a peace treaty with Israel until there was at least progress on the Palestinian talks. And that hasn't happened. And so Palestinians are very angry, they're frustrated, and I think it shows what, a lot of us have known for a while, which is that, the rest of the Arab world really does not put the Palestinian cause at the top of their agenda. Will they reach out to the United States? Maybe under a new administration, if that happens after the elections in November, but I tend to doubt it. I kind of think that they will try to pursue more a diplomatic angle through the United Nations, through committees in the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, things like that. But Palestinians are definitely feeling frustrated today.
Well, I guess we'll just keep an eye to see how that kind of pans out. But over these last 2 days, leaders from both sides will be discussing a number of issues. So could you just kind of let us know what direction that they might be heading in?
Sure. So the delegations that went today, the Israeli delegation includes representatives of tourism and business and all kinds of other, government offices that they want to establish ties with Abu Dhabi. There was already an agreement signed last week to work together towards a vaccine, COVID vaccine. The big sort of elephant in the room is the security issue. And whether the United States will sell F-35s, which are the most advanced fighter jet, they're stealth fighters that Israel has, to Abu Dhabi. And there are no defense officials or security officials on this flight except for the head of national security, Mayor Ben Shabbat, who was really key in helping to negotiate this. However, it was announced that within 2 or 3 weeks, a delegation of security officials will fly to Abu Dhabi, Israeli security officials, which means that there's kind of been an agreement reached about the F-35s. Now, Israel has some concern about what's called the QME, its qualitative military edge, and that if Abu Dhabi gets these F-35 fighters, then other Gulf states will want them, Saudi Arabia will want them, and is that something that could, be damaging to Israel's security? But I think that Israel has kind of realized that that's part of the deal and has made a decision that it's worth it, to have this peace treaty and this normalization with the Emirates. So I think that whatever tensions there might have been over the F-35s, I think we'll see that kind of go away. And Israel is very open to all kinds of deals and hopes that through the Emirates they can also expand with all kinds of business deals. Israel is very advanced in terms of, startups. They call Israel the startup nation. So it's looking for a place to sell a lot of its technology, and the Emirates and the Gulf may be just that place.
All right. Well, Linda, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Still ahead on The World Today. This year's VMAs was reflective of the season we are in, the coronavirus pandemic, and paid heavy tribute to King T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching The World Today on Channels Television. Russia says the situation in neighboring Belarus is now under control and that it does not need to send in forces to support Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko, who is facing protest after a disputed election. Last week, President Putin had said the Kremlin had set up a special police force to support Lukashenko at his request, but says it would not be deployed unless unrest there spun out of control. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Belarusian security forces and the country's leadership is keeping the situation under control. Meanwhile, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has discussed a project of a new constitution for the country with its Chief Justice, Valentin Tsukalo. The constitution adopted on March 15, 1994, had made Belarus a parliamentary presidential republic with Supreme Soviet as a major authority. But later amendments expanded the powers of the president. Last July, a Belarus opposition politician, Viktor Babariko, proposed to amend the country's constitution on the basis of the 1994 law, which contains a limitation of presidential terms. Lukashenko said on Monday that a new constitution would be brought up for public discussion. The president reminded everyone would have only one vote in a referendum while addressing the zealous supporters of changes. Police in Moscow have opened a criminal inquiry after an anti-Kremlin opposition activist and political blogger Yegor Zhukov was beaten and left bloodied outside his home over the weekend. The 22-year-old student, who was a leading figure in large anti-government protests last year, was taken to the hospital late on Sunday after being assaulted by two people outside of his apartment in western Moscow, his allies said on social media. They published pictures of his bloodied face covered in bruises and gashes. He was among 1,000 people detained in Moscow in July 2019 in one of the biggest crackdowns on anti-Kremlin demonstrators in recent years. He and other protesters had taken to the streets to call for free elections. Well, let's have a chat now with Jimmy JeanLouis, an actor in the U.S. Jimmy, thanks for joining us on the program today.
It's a pleasure.
So the situation in the United States now, following the passing of Chadwick Boseman, has been very sad. What are people saying, or how are people feeling out there right now?
People are stunned. They are shocked. They can't believe it. The kingdom has lost its king. This is the feeling, the overall feeling, which is pretty sad for everybody, you know, especially in the acting community where we really had a leader that represented us well, you know, as the king, and as at an early age of 33, so it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he was so young to pass away like that, but I feel that his presence, especially in the role of T'Challa in Black Panther, that he's really left an impression on not just, you know, his fans, but also those within the acting community. So what do you feel like people have to take away from his legacy?
Well, they have to know that, first of all, as he was doing Black Panther, he was already sick, so he knew it. I think he stood for something that was great. I believe that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, Chadwick Boseman will be a star still, because people will remember him as being our king. And his message is always on point. And the fact that he was able to go through that with the cancer, you know, it's a strong message as far as how much we can accomplish even in a short period of time. So yes, I still cannot believe it, because I met him about 15 years ago when he started as a youngster, and to see him disappear like that, I don't know what to say, to be honest with you.
Yes, well, I mean, may he rest in peace. And thank you so much for joining us today to speak a little bit more on the life of Chadwick Boseman. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia. Please stay safe.